As always, welcome everyone to the Lunch and Learn webinar. I'm so happy that Sharon is joining us today to talk about cost. What's in your cost? How do you go about submitting your bids? And Sharon knows, I know that's key, but I hate numbers, and she's making me begin to love numbers once they start working for you and understand what formula you're going to need when you're looking at your cost. But before we get into the presentation, I just wanted to catch everyone up. This week, I've had two students who emailed me with their wins, and I'm going to mute everyone because I'm getting a lot of feedback. Jeremy, you'll just have to unmute your phone when it's time, okay? Okay. I'm so happy. Eric Dabney out of Alabama, he's gone through our program and he called me or sent an email saying I'm still winning this Christmas season. So he won another contract on Wednesday. And I wanted to share this because he's actually applying what we're preaching and going after the low-hanging fruit and understanding where he started and where he is now. I'm just very proud of him. Right here, I took his DUN number, and those of you that's gone through the training, you know, we go back and do research, and I put it in FPDS so that you could see how he's actually applying what we're preaching. He's starting with the low-hanging fruit. He started last year winning his first contract. That first one was for $13,000. The next one was for $9,000. This year he won another one for $31,000, but he actually won two contracts in September. And then now they haven't even posted this one. That was $77,000. So you can see that he's gradually building up his past performance and going after low-hanging fruit, because these low-hanging fruits begin to add up. Can't you all see that? That makes sense. Also, I want to make sure that you all are going to come to the conference. I'm so excited. We have some dynamite presenters, both from the commercial side as well from the government agency side. Our panel is going to consist of individuals from SBA, CDC, and they're really going to talk about their roles and what they actually do. Now that you've gone through the training and learned about these individuals or these positions as part of the training, you're going to now begin to connect the people with the position, talking about funding. We're going to have Stacy Mollison. She's one of our proud students that has really mastered this game, and breakout sessions that really is going to be geared for individuals that are trying to start a business, individuals that's already in business, and really we have a panel specifically for all of you to come together, and we're going to practice RFQ, identify RFQ, and as a team, we're going to see who prepares it properly, and you will be judged and win a prize. So I'm so excited about the conference next month, and please make sure you tell everyone, spread the word. We also will have a panel of some successful 8A companies that have graduated from the program. They're going to share their best practices and lessons learned, things that they've learned through this process. Again, I want you to hear it from all voices. We have exhibitors. I've just spoken with another connector who's actually going to try to bring some UPS and Home Depot, some of the large commercial vendors, Porsche, because again, we want to know how to do business with them. The next day, we're going to talk about the Mentor Protege program. Again, that's a program that I'm consistently pushing because it is a great program. this is a company or two companies that I've worked with that I helped get into the program, and I want them to share how they were able to get to this point and where they are in the program. This panel, again, will consist of the large prime contractors and them, us understanding who are you, what are your players, and how do we get to you. And then we're going to wrap up. So we're definitely excited about the conference, and we hope that everyone is prepared and reserve their dates. It's going to be at the Renaissance Airport Hotel in Atlanta, Georgia. With that being said, that we can go ahead and go into our Lunch and Learn webinar. Sharon, I'm going to unmute. Can you unmute your phone? Let me see. It's okay. All right, there you go. I think we're doing it. We're both doing it. Okay, there we go. Great.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm glad to hear that. All right, well, thank you very much, Paula. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to our community. It always gives me great joy to share the information that I have. I hope the volume is good. Am I clear?
You are.
You're okay, perfect. Great. All right, excellent. So today what I'd like to talk about with our community members is pricing a job. And, I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've come across in not only my own personal experience, but also from working with other people who are in similar situations, just trying to master this federal contracting game. And there are some key things that I think that we as a community need to be aware of when we're looking to price a job. The first thing that I hear this all the time, so that's the reason why I'm bringing it to the table, is there are a lot of people who are pricing jobs to be able to get the job. And so essentially they're not really concerned with what it costs them to provide the service. What they want to do is be the low bidder on the job to get the work, just to start building the performance. And what I would say to the folks on our webinar today is just be careful if you choose that as a strategy. One of the things that we're noticing is that not only are the contracting officers becoming aware of that practice, and of course they're not encouraging it, but the other thing that we're finding is that, especially if it's a longer window of performance, when you make that decision, they're seeing a lot more people not being able to complete the work on the contract because they've priced themselves so far under the market that they're just not able to go forward. So the key thing, you don't have to try to necessarily in the early days try to make a lot of money, but you at least should be trying to cover your costs. I don't think any of us is successful enough where we should consider subsidizing the government, right? I mean, I can't afford it. So I don't think we need to subsidize the government, but so you should be aware of what your costs are and just make sure that whatever the pricing, you can be as aggressive as you want to, but you should at least be covering your costs to provide that good or service.
And more importantly, if you aren't able to complete that job, that's a default. And so you don't want to be in that position. And the other thing, Sharon, having worked again on both sides, I know that the government on a lot of these projects will already establish a independent government estimate. It's a new project. What we're training the students in looking at USA spending and FPDS, they can get an idea of what they bought previously. But on new projects, the government will have their own estimate. So you have to be careful about those low bids. So thank you, Sharon. Go ahead.
No problem. So having said that, that kind of leads us to where the rest of our talk is going to go. So for you to be able to effectively cover your costs, it's very important that you know what they are. So another experience, and what I find helpful is just sharing with the listeners, the people on our webinar here, some of the experiences that I've had with other people. So for example, I've had other other companies, other clients come to me and say, okay, they're going to respond to an RFP or an RFQ. They're going to provide a quote, and the only cost that they're taking into consideration is the direct cost to provide that service. So all of us as business people, I think, intuitively understand that if you are providing a service, there is a cost associated to delivering that service. But the challenge that I'm finding with businesses that are relatively new to this space is that what we're not taking into consideration is, yes, there are direct costs. If I'm going to send somebody to your business to perform administrative support for a week, I have to pay that person. Almost everybody understands that that is one of the costs. But what a lot of people are not taking into consideration is the office that I'm working in when that person comes in and gets interviewed, the insurance that I have to pay to stay in business, the rent that I have to pay, not necessarily just the fringe benefits, because I think most people get those because it's directly related to the resource, but all of the things that have to be in place for you to begin to offer those services, those costs have to be covered. And so what I find is the biggest challenge for new people in the space, and quite frankly, even people who've been doing this for a while, is recognizing that one, their direct costs, and we all, those are easy to identify, but they're also indirect costs. And those indirect costs fall into different categories, but it's very important that you're able to quantify and accumulate all your costs so that when you go to pricing, you know what it is, what are you trying to cover.
Absolutely. Even again, using myself as an example and starting out, again, not knowing what I should be charging and then getting comfortable with a consulting rate until you're pulling up. It's like, no, there's costs associated with you doing business. I have you as an accountant, I have attorneys, I have those fees that necessarily need to be covered. That's not necessarily associated with that direct labor position or cost that I'm providing, right? Is that what you're
Correct.
saying? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, once the job's done, somebody has to prepare the invoice to send it to the government. That's the cost. I mean, it's not necessarily directly related minute by minute or hour by hour, because hopefully that person is going to be invoicing many people. But that's still a cost that you have to cover. And again, your attorney, insurance, all of the other costs that go into creating that service, to being able to offer that service, you have to take that into consideration.
So how do you begin if you're just starting out? How do I know what costs I should be factoring as a new company in billing the government? Is there a formula, or how do I even begin?
Excellent question. So I think the first thing a lot of times, we read stuff on the internet, we talk to people, and there's a lot of terminology that's being thrown out, the wrap rate, the fully loaded rate, all of the different things, and people get confused. But what I would say, the first thing to do is to identify what all your costs are. So starting out, even if you don't have a software, an accounting software system, sit with a spreadsheet and think about all of the things that are involved in you being in business and all of the costs that you incur to be able to provide any type of good or service. So even if you're starting out and you're working out of a home office, allocate a cost for that home office, because that space is not free, right? If it's a home office, you have to pay for that home. So if it's 1 bedroom in a 3-bedroom home and you're paying $1,500 a month as your monthly payment, it's not unreasonable to allocate $500 as your monthly office expense to cover the cost of using that space.
Okay.
Think about phone service. If you have transportation that you're estimating. Now, the wonderful thing with the government is that they don't try to tell you what to do. They only have one requirement. Whatever you do needs to be reasonable. So again, if you have a house that has 3 bedrooms and you're paying $1,500, to use one of the for the use of the space, and you want to charge the government $2,000 for rent expense, that's not reasonable, right? That would make sense to somebody. So, but you could charge $350, you could charge $400. The government is not trying to be, to tell you where to go. But what they're saying is that whatever methodology you use, it should be intentional. So, okay, you can explain it, it's rational. I came up with that $500 because it's 1/3 of the space, and that's what I'm using. So some rational methodology that you're going to use so that they feel that they're getting a fair shake. And once you've chosen a methodology, use it consistently. So this month you charge $500. Next month things are tight, so you're going to charge $7. The next month it's $2. That doesn't work. It has to be consistent, because if it's consistent, then you can justify it. They're not going to come in and tell you, okay, you have to charge Y dollars. You just have to have a rationale behind what you're charging and how you came to that conclusion.
Okay, so I don't have a contract. Is this something that I should be setting up now? So as I begin to bid on these contracts, I'll know what I want to add on to the cost?
Yes, yes. I think that it is, again, another great question. Yes. And I think, especially for folks starting out, that's one of the big challenges. So you're like, well, you have to capture your costs. Well, if you don't start tracking what those costs should be, by the time you get a contract, you're now going to try to start to figure that out. Put a model in place. So that was going to be my next point. Create a pricing model. Again, it can be something simple in Excel where you say, okay, anybody who's doing business needs to operate out of a space. What am I going to charge my company or my business to be able to use the space that I have? And listen, there's a difference between charging it and funding it. So you don't necessarily have to pay the $200 or $300 that you're going to be charging yourself for rent or whatever that number is. But you should start to track it, because then when you get to the point where you move to new space, you can just change that number. You're developing a template that you can use and that you can grow into as your business continues to take off and does better.
Yes, that makes sense.
Does that make sense? Okay, great.
Sense. So is there a difference even, do you still bill those costs if it's like a product or a service? Is there a difference in what you're charging for those pools of cost, those cost pools?
Okay, so what you're doing what we're talking about doing is developing the cost pools, just as you explained now. Now, remember, at the end of the day, sometimes some of the jobs, some of the projects that you were showing that your student won, those were goods and services projects. And so one of the things those were goods, those were procurement, not necessarily services. So there's a fixed cost that you're using to acquire the material. You're going to put some markup on it that you're going to use to charge the government. If the costs are not hard costs for right now, you don't necessarily have to nickel and dime every portion of it. But you want to get into the habit of developing a pricing model, because what's going to happen is, as you get out to projects where you have to justify material and expenses to the government, the good news for us is that when you get a contract that's a fixed fee contract, the government does not require that you justify your pricing. They either accept it or they don't. Once you get into other types of contracts, which is mainly time and material or cost plus reimbursement contracts, the government is looking for you to explain to them where your costs came from. And if you wait until you got that contract to now start creating cost pools, you're going to be behind the 8 ball.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I have 2 questions right quick.
Sure.
One from Dawn. She said, what if your office space changed the following year, which would not be consistent with the amount from a year or years before, right? So yeah, I think you answered that question, as long as you're able to.
And what I would say to Dawn and to the others on the call is that when you create the model, remember, it's not carved in concrete. You're building a template. One of the things that I'm going to recommend as we go through the call is that periodically, at least once a year, you go back and you adjust the pricing. Again, the government is not going to expect that every month or every few weeks you're going to adjust your pricing. They understand how business works, but they want you to be able to say, hey, this was the basis for me coming up with this number. The situation has changed. We've grown into a larger space. And what I recommend doing is creating a series of spreadsheets that you're going to use to come up with your cost pools. And as the costs change, you can update them, but you don't want to start trying to figure out what your pool should look like or what the pieces should be after you've gotten the contract, because we all know once you get the contract, you're spinning at 1,000,000 miles an hour. You're not trying to go back and create it. So now that we have the downtime, let's set up the templates. And again, those can be revised. You can adjust it as your situation changes. Get that out of the way first.
And are those templates will be similar to what's going to be in your accounting system in the chart of accounts? Are they mirror, or would that be something completely different?
Okay, great question. So if you think of your chart of accounts is like the bone structure of your accounting system. So if you think of your accounting system like a body, your chart of accounts is a skeleton that whole system is hanging on. So the information that you're going to use to create those pools is going to come from that skeleton. But what the templates are going to do is they're going to group the information differently so that you can come up with a rate that you can use as a multiplier to be able to know when you're doing cost plus contract, how you're going to build the government. And I know it's kind of getting in the weeds, but I know you don't love the numbers, but I mean, we got to go there. Sorry, we just got to go there.
All right, we're going to go to the next question. The next question is the additional cost inclusive of the awarded contract, or is it above and beyond the awarded contract? That came from Dwayne.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that question?
Is the additional cost inclusive of the awarded contract, or is it above and beyond the awarded contract?
So I'm not sure that I'm 100% clear on this question, but what I'm interpreting that to be is if the cost of doing the work for that contract, should that be included in the rates? Is that what that question is?
Asking. Dwayne, you can unmute your phone and ask it. I think it is that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that's the question.
Okay, and that's a great question. So here's what happens typically. Typically, at the point that when you put your pools together, and that's one of the benefits of making sure that you have a pool in place. When you put your pool together, a part of your general and administrative expense is going to be proposal writing and proposal presentations. You're going to have preparations. You're going to have some costs that are going to be included in there for that type of work. At the point that you are getting the award, it's probably too close for you to be able to include the specific costs related to getting that contract into your pricing, because it's just not, I don't think you're going to have enough time. So what will happen is at the end of the year or the end of the cycle, when you're getting ready to update your template information, you can then go ahead and adjust your cost. If it costs you more than you estimated to respond to that proposal, or you're seeing that you're taking on more administrative costs to do this type of work, you will adjust your G&A pool, but it won't necessarily be specific to the cost related to that one particular contract. I don't know if that's clear, or you need us to go through that a little bit more slowly.
And I think it should be, people don't understand or even begin associating their time with a dollar amount. You know what I mean? So you're talking about what is the cost to prepare that proposal. So should businesses start putting a salary placing a salary and associating a cost with that time that you're already applying to the government to begin to build out that pool? Would you recommend that?
I think, no, I definitely think that when you're putting together, and again, that's why I recommend a series of spreadsheets, the salary that you intend to pay yourself for the upcoming year should factor into your pool, right? That should be a part of your assessment. Now, what's going to be different or what's going to be interesting is that you're not going to spend 100% of your time doing direct services. For example, all of us are business owners, so there's a portion of time that you're out soliciting business. That's not typically a chargeable use of your time. However, if you build a model where you estimate that 40% of your time is going to be sourcing business, and that 40% of your salary gets rolled into G&A, then when, the only reason you would have to make a change is if at the end of the year, when you look back, you said, whoa, I really spent 60% of my time, so I need to change that G&A number. But your overall total salary is already fitted into the pools in different places.
Okay. And
does that make sense?
That absolutely, because again, starting out, it's just even hard to determine, do I put a salary? What is my salary? Because right now I'm just trying to make bills. You know what I mean? So, but I think as you're growing, these are things that you have to factor in as a cost. I have another question from Terry. Her question is, if you rent an office space, can you charge the entire rent amount to the government?
If you do 100% of your business with the government, and that's all you use that space for, that would be considered a direct cost. Again, it's not all your costs are, whatever percentage of your business is done with the government, it is reasonable to charge that percentage of rent to the government project. So say you have a good mix, you have 50% private and 50% government, and you allocate 50% of your rent towards your government contracting, that's logical. I mean, that makes sense to people. However, if you're doing 10% government work and you're allocating 90% of the rent, that's going to be a hard justification to make. So again, you want to break it out into the different pools. Eventually, it will all get covered, but you can't charge a direct cost if you're not using that space directly for government work.
And even from that question, when they are working with commercial clients, shouldn't some of that cost be associated, whatever they're billing onto that commercial client? That it's the same formula across the board?
And that's an excellent point, Paula. And I think that that's the big takeaway that I would love for our students to have from today. All of your costs have to be covered. So if you only bill for direct costs, you are the one who's paying for all of the indirect costs, because all of the costs have to be covered. So whether you're working with the government, if you build a proper pricing model, that model can be applied to both the private and the public sector, because all your costs are covered, and all your model is helping you to do is to figure out, how am I going to allocate this between the customers that I have?
Very good. Thank you. And we're at the 12:30 mark. Does anyone have any questions that you want to ask before we close today's Lunch and Learn? Went pretty quickly. We have one more question from Terry again. When you are just starting to seek government contracts, but is currently working in the commercial space, how do you determine the percentage of cost to the government?
What I would recommend, Terry, is I would recommend that you make an estimate. So say your plan is to spend 20% of your time and use 20% of your resources going after government work. You build the pool that way. At the end of the year, you can go back and make an adjustment if you saw that, well, I had planned to spend 20% of my time, but I only spent 10, or I got lucky and things went better than I expected and I spent 40. You can go back and make adjustments. But the whole idea, the most important thing is, one, identifying all the costs and then making sure that we break them into the appropriate pools so that we can allocate them. And again, I don't want to freak everybody out at this point. If you're getting a fixed rate contract, it's still important, or a fixed fee contract, it's still important to understand your costs and your pricing, but you have a little bit more flexibility because you don't have to share that with the government. The rubber hits the road once you start getting contracts where you have to provide cost proposals and cost breakdown and justify how you come up with your pricing. When you get to those contracts, now somebody else other than you is going to be able to see what it is that you're doing, and you don't want to be in that place to start trying to have that thought process in your business. So right now we're trying to stay ahead of the curve and do the prep work early, but even if you don't get it 100% right, unless you're pricing out the contract, the only person who's going to see it is really you and your accountant.
And I think it's also important because when you start winning certain types of contract, even me as a business owner, I had to keep a timesheet because that would be part of the audit. So I'm telling you, even starting out, you all need to start thinking along those lines because you are technically an employee of the company and your time has to be accounted for when you start going after some of the larger contracts. They want to know, how are you tracking your time as the owner?
No, and to that point, I mean, my husband works for an engineering firm that does work for DOT. And so they have high levels, the high level office managers in their, and senior structural engineers in their business all have to fill out a timesheet because that's how they bill.
And it makes sense. You're spending taxpayers' dollars, so they need to know how it's been spent. Thank you, Sharon.
Absolutely.
Sharon,
my pleasure.
Again, has opened up her financial resource center for TPI. She's now working with a lot of our students and setting up their back office, and she'll be rolling out shortly and soon some of the curriculum along this space, because for me, this is the heart of the business, and this is where a lot of small businesses struggle, even myself, even today. I do what I do. I don't know, I don't want the numbers, but in order for me to succeed, somebody needs to understand the numbers, and it has to be you as that business owner. So Sharon, can you give out your information on how they can reach you if they want to follow up?
Sure. The number, I'm going to give my office number, and I'll also give my cell phone number. My office number is 954-693-9989. The best number to reach me on is my cell, 754-246-6002. Probably the best way to reach me is via text, and then I can text you back and set up an appointment for us to have a call.
Now, can you give it to me one more time, and I'll put it in the email? I mean, in the chat.
Sure. Okay, so the best number to reach me is my cell, 754-246-6002.
Okay.
And the number for that's the best way to reach me. And just text me and I will get back in touch and we can schedule a call to talk about their individual needs.
Okay. This was a great webinar. Did you all enjoy this? Was it a great? Give us some shout. Unmute your phone.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is awesome.
Wonderful.
Absolutely.
Show some love. Also, go ahead and sign up for the conference next month, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. That'll be the next webinar that we'll be holding. Okay? Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank y'all.
Thanks a lot.